did you have back in July of 2014?
Approximately 20.
Are any of the vehicles that you rented at your company, do they have SunPass transponders on them?
They all do.
And what are SunPass transponders, basically?
It's a small sticker, a square sticker that I install on the inside of the windshield of the vehicle.
Does each transponder that you have for your rental cars come with like a unique identification number?
Yes.
And are you the one who actually affixes each transponder to each vehicle?
Yes.
Once you affix one of them to a certain vehicle, is it transferable? Like you can just pull it off and stick it on a different car?
No, typically when you pull it off, it's destroyed.
And where do you place these on your rental cars?
On the inside of the windshield behind the rear view mirror.
So in the center area?
Yes.
Do you keep track of which transponders you're affixing to which vehicles over time?
Yes.
And say, for example, you put a transponder on one particular vehicle, you would note that that unique identifying number on the transponder goes to the vehicle with a certain VIN number, certain tag number,
Yes,
et cetera.
I register it with SunPass, and then I also have an internal list in my office.
If a customer comes to your rental place and they want to rent a car and they end up going on toll roads, do you just foot the bill, or does the customer have to pay once they return the car? How does that work?
No, upon return, we pull up that SunPass on that car and settle up then.
Do you remember back in July 2014 approximately how many like Toyota Priuses you had?
Approximately 10.
Remember how many of them were greenish or silver?
2.
The 2 that you did have at that time, were there any differences between those two Toyota Priuses?
Yes, the primary difference was one had aftermarket wheels or aftermarket rims.
Did your company rent one of those Toyota Priuses to a Luis Rivera back in July of 2014?
Yes.
And is there a contract that documents that rental agreement between your company and Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's already in evidence as State's Exhibit 82. Is that the rental agreement between Save Gas, which you previously mentioned was hybrid, and Luis Rivera?
Yes.
And the certificate of authenticity on the back, you filled that out yourself?
Yes.
A couple questions about this contract. Let me first ask you, was the Toyota Prius that was rented to Mr. Rivera, was this the one with the aftermarket rims or without the aftermarket rims?
Without.
So they would just be the normal standard wheels on the car?
Correct. Stock from the factory.
Is this contract, let me push up a little bit. Wrong direction. Up here. Does this contract indicate that there were tolls that were owed upon return of vehicles?
Yes.
I also want to ask you about this word brother with a phone number next to it at the top of the agreement. Do you recognize that handwriting?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
That's my handwriting.
Okay, and did you fill out this contract?
No.
You wrote the one indication, the 786-372-5986 number?
Yes.
Do you recall why you wrote that on the agreement?
Yeah, as the owner of the company, I try to get any contact information for anyone that's renting the car, or maybe anyone that might be with the person renting the car, so that I have contact info.
So you have an alternative way to get in touch with the renter?
Yes.
Do you have independent recollection of why you wrote brother on this one?
No.
Okay. But it could have been someone with the person renting the vehicle, such as Luis Rivera?
Yes, most likely.
We talked about the Prius that was rented in this particular contract not having aftermarket rims, it had the standard manufacturer's rims on it. Do you remember if it had any replacement parts on it?
Yes, I remember this car had a black passenger side mirror.
Why did it have that?
I'm sure at some rental it got wrecked.
Does that happen a lot?
Yes.
Okay. And do you keep on stock replacement parts when a vehicle comes back damaged?
I have some parts on stock. If not, there's aftermarket parts that are readily available.
Okay, and if you were replacing a side mirror, what color are those replacement ones? You may have said.
Black.
Black. Do you always paint them to match the remaining body of the car?
Highly unlikely that I paint them.
What about toe clips to your, did either of these vehicles, meaning the Prius, the Toyota Priuses, did either of them have toe clips on the car?
I mean, the Prius has a toe clip on the front bumper, and very common they fall off.
What is a toe clip? I just need to know.
It's a little clip that comes off the front bumper, so you can hook a metal rod onto it so the tow truck can pull the vehicle up on the flatbed.
Okay. And they have covers over them?
They do have a little square cover.
And those covers are the things that fall off a lot of the time. What about GPS trackers? Do any of your cars have GPS monitors on them?
Yes, they all do.
Do you use a certain company to monitor the vehicle's locations via the global positioning system? And which company is that?
Spirion.
Do you know how frequently the GPS trackers track the location of the rental cars?
Yes, it automatically tracks itself once a day.
Like once every 24 hours or every 25
Every
hours?
24 hours, give or take.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd offer into evidence what I've marked for identification as States Exhibit 91. These are the business records from Spirion for the GPS information with an attached certificate of authenticity.
Any objection? None from Mr. Garcia.
No objection, Your Honor.
To be admitted.
When this Prius was returned to your company back in July of 2014, actually, do you remember what day it was returned?
I can look at the contract and tell you it's probably on the bottom of the contract.
Can you see it there?
Yes.
Okay, what day was it returned?
So typically it'd be July 21st, the bottom right.
Okay. And when the vehicle was returned, did you notice any damage to it?
I did not notice any damage.
Tell the jury about when a vehicle is returned. Do you thoroughly clean the vehicle from top to bottom and examine it in great detail?
Being a small company, I do not thoroughly clean the vehicles.
Okay, do you strike that?
Unless they're destroyed, I would notice that, but otherwise they come in the way they go out.
So your turnaround process is minimal as far as cleaning or
Yes.
repairing anything? Do you still own that Prius?
No,
What did you do with it?
I sold it.
To whom?
I don't recall who I sold it to.
Do you recall about when you sold it?
No.
Do you know the defendant in this case, Sigfredo Garcia?
I've met him before.
And that's through him renting vehicles at your company?
I don't recall if Sigfredo ever rented a vehicle, but just being there and a gentleman that used to work for me, they were friendly.
They may be hanging out near the business.
Yes.
At some point, once TPD began the investigation in this murder case, did they reach out to you and ask for information about that unique identifying SunPass transponder that was on this Toyota Prius?
Yes, I had 2 different visits. The first visit, I think the gentleman asked me for information.
And did you provide all the information that you had for this particular Prius, the tag, the VIN, the SunPass transponder number, all of that information over to the investigators?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross.
Good afternoon.
Do you recall, or were you working that day that the Prius was rented?
I believe I was there that day, that's why my handwriting would be on the application.
And you indicated that you are the one that wrote brother and the phone number at the top portion of the contract, is that correct?
That's my handwriting, yes.
And is it I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you say that was your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
And is it your testimony that Secreto Garcia entered the car rental area with Luis Rivera?
No.
Luis Rivera went in by himself.
Yes, as far as I know.
Did you know who Luis Rivera was from the past?
I don't know if I had any previous interactions with him.
Did you know who he was?
I rented a vehicle to him, so I met him at that time.
Prior to that, had you met him before?
Not as far as I know.
And he entered your establishment and provided identification to rent this vehicle from you?
Yes.
And would it be safe to say that since Secreto Garcia wasn't in the business with you, you took the information from Luis Rivera and then drafted that note?
That's correct.
No further questions.
McManus?
One brief second, Your Honor. No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Redirect.
No question, John.
Any juror have a question of this witness? All right, you can step down. Do we need to keep him any further?
No, sir.
Do I need him?
No, Your Honor.
You're excused. Thank you for being here. Call your next witness.
Danny Beth Richey.
Ballistics, DOE.
Come up here, please, ma'am. You would face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Swear to affirm testimony about giving this case be truth, whole truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God.
I do.
Have a seat. Slide up the microphone, please.
Please introduce yourself and spell your name.
My name is Elizabeth Richey, ELIZABETH RICHEY.
And do you go by Danny Beth as well?
I do.
All right. And how are you employed, Ms. Richey?
I work for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
How long have you worked for FDLE?
I've worked for FDLE since 2007. I've been in the firearms section since 2009 and in my current position as a crime laboratory analyst since 2012.
What are your duties as a crime lab analyst?
My primary responsibilities are to compare fired components, so things like bullets, cartridge cases, and shot shells, and examine them and compare them to suspect firearms to see if they were fired from a specific firearm. If no firearm is available, then I will try to determine if the components were fired from the same firearm or different firearms.
And what training and education do you have to perform those types of analyses?
Well, first, to be hired with FDLE, you have to have at least a bachelor's of science in some sort of laboratory science. I have a bachelor's of science in marine science with Jacksonville University. When I was promoted to my crime laboratory analyst position, I went through FDLE's 18-month training program. The first 12 months of that program is spent basically in bookwork, practical exercises, and examinations. And it covers the history and development of firearms, firearms identification, tool mark analysis, ammunition, serial number restoration, and it also included tours of firearms manufacturers as well as a gunpowder manufacturer. When the first phase of my training was done, the second phase was 6 months of supervised casework where I worked actual cases under the direct supervision of a qualified analyst.
All right. And have you been previously qualified as an expert in a court of law?
Yes, I have.
All right. What have you previously testified as an expert in?
Firearms identification,
All right. And how many times has that occurred?
approximately 55.
Judge, at this time I tender Ms. Richey as an expert in firearms identification.
Any board hire?
Nothing, Mr. Garcia. None, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
All right. Ms. Richey, I want to ask you about some projectiles which were collected in reference to a case involving the death of Mr. Markel, which we've marked as States Exhibits 167 and 168. you recognize these items?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
When I receive evidence, I mark the outer packaging with the laboratory case number, agency exhibit number, and my initials, and those are present on these items.
Are the items in the same or substantially the same condition as when you analyze them?
They appear to be.
All right. What are the items?
They are 2 fired bullets.
Okay. And what type of analysis did you perform on the 2 fired bullets?
I compared them to see if they had been fired from the same firearm.
How do you do that?
When I receive bullets in a case with no gun, I will start with doing my general inventory. I will go through the evidence to make sure what I have is matching on our case tracking form, and then I will open it up and I will examine the evidence for class characteristics. Class characteristics are the characteristics that are determined by the manufacturer prior to manufacturing. So when they go to manufacture a gun, they have to decide what caliber that gun is. They have to decide what kind of rifling it will have, how many grooves that rifling will have, how wide those lands and grooves will be. When a bullet is fired through a gun, it picks up the impressions of the rifling. So I can examine a bullet and determine what caliber class it may be from, and then I can use the numbers of lands and grooves and look at the 2 items to see if they should be compared to each other. If those class characteristics match up, then I will move to my comparison microscope, and what that is 2 compound microscopes that sit side by side. There's an optical bridge with a set of eyepieces that allows me to look at 2 items of this, at the same magnification at the same time. So I can examine those 2 bullets and look for individual characteristics to see if the individual characteristics that come from firing the gun, that come from interacting with the inside of the barrel, match up with bullet 1 to bullet 2. And then I will make my determination based on the level of individual characteristics that I see on my evidence.
And did both projectiles and States Exhibits 167 and 168 have rifling characteristics sufficient to conduct this comparison?
Yes.
All right. And are you able to tell us anything about the caliber of the bullets in States Exhibits 167 and 168?
The caliber class of the bullets would be 38, and what that means is that the caliber class is like a family of calibers. It's kind of like saying a pickup truck and you have a lot of different pickup trucks. The caliber can have different dimensions, but what makes the caliber class the same is that the bullets have approximately the same diameter regardless of what kind of cartridge case it was loaded into. So the 38 caliber class includes 38 Special and 357 Magnum calibers, and I determined that it was either a 38 Special or 357 Magnum, most likely, within the 38 caliber class.
Okay. And what was your result when you compared the class characteristics of the 2 projectiles?
The class characteristics matched up.
So what does that mean?
That means that they had the same number of lands and grooves. The widths of those lands and grooves were approximately the same, and the direction of twist of the rifling was the same, and the diameter of the bullet was approximately the same.
Does that mean it's your opinion that the 2 projectiles in States 167 and 168 were fired from the same weapon?
Yes, but I did not use the class characteristics to come to that determination. I used the individual characteristics that are found within the rifling to come to that determination.
All right, tell us a little bit more about that.
Individual characteristics are the striations on the side of a bullet that come from interacting with defects inside of the barrel. So when a barrel is manufactured, metal is chipped away, and that leaves defects inside the barrel. And because metal is not chipped away in the exact same way from barrel 1 to barrel 2, even when you use the same tool to create barrel 1 and barrel 2, there can be microscopic defects inside the barrel that will be unique to barrel 1, and there will be microscopic defects that are unique to barrel 2. So when they come out of the factory, they're already microscopically different. And then through use and abuse, depending on how well you care for your firearm, more character, more defects can be added to the inside of that barrel. So as a bullet passes down the barrel, it is obturating or expanding to fill into the rifling. And the side of that bullet is interacting with those microscopic defects on the inside of the barrel. And what happens is you get scratches on the side of the bullets. And those are the scratches that are unique to that firearm. And I will examine those scratches to determine if a bullet or a set of bullets had been fired from the same firearm.
All right, and are those scratches that are unique to the barrel of a particular firearm known as rifling characteristics?
The rifling characteristics would be the numbers of grooves that are inside a barrel. So if you look down a barrel, you can see high points and low points. And those would be the rifling characteristics. The number of grooves you see, the direction those grooves go, either left or right, and the widths of those grooves. Those are the rifling characteristics of a firearm.
So you, in your business, look at the class characteristics, the rifling characteristics, and then also the individual characteristics.
Yes.
Okay. And what was your conclusion after looking at all those factors in reference to these two projectiles?
The two bullets had been fired from the same firearm.
And what, if anything, can you tell us about the firearm that was used to fire these two bullets?
When I receive bullets that don't have a gun, I can take the rifling characteristics and enter them into the general rifling characteristics database. At the time, it was a database that was held by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and what I do is I would input information into the database: the caliber class, the numbers of lands and grooves, the direction of twist, and the widths of the lands and grooves. And the database will give me a list of potential manufacturers that may have fired these bullets. Now, the list is long, or the list can be very long, but the database is also not totally, it's not all-inclusive. Not every single gun in the world is represented within that database, but many, many, many are. So it's an investigative tool that I can give to investigators that say, it could have been these guns, but don't exclude others if you have, if you think that it may be another one.
And what can you tell us in this case?
In this case,
Well, I guess I should ask you, is it a long list?
it was approximately 2 pages long.
Okay, and were they all 38 special or 357 Magnum?
They were both.
All right, and are they all revolvers?
Yes.
No further questions.
Cross.
Nothing from Mr. Garcia.
McMahon.
Yes, Your Honor. Days always difficult. This wasn't the only work you did on this case, right?
Correct.
Later on, in 2016, around September, you did another laboratory analysis, right?
I did.
And what was that for?
There was a firearm that was found, and they were wanting to see if it was possible if it had been the firearm that fired these 2 bullets.
By they, you're talking about investigator Jason Newland, right?
Investigator Jason Newland is who contacted me. I'm not sure who found it.
Somebody brought a gun to FDLE is what you know.
Yes.
Now, once that gun goes to FDLE, it then starts a process in your lab to do a full analysis, right?
Yes.
Now, there was no indication that those projectiles came out of the gun that you tested in September, right?
The bullets were not fired from the gun that I received.
But nonetheless, you did this full workup.
Yes.
It's not on you to make a decision not to investigate something or to investigate it. You objectively investigate what's brought in, right?
That's correct.
Now, I just want to go through the list, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm giving these documents a wrong name, but when you get an item in, specifically a pistol, you end up doing an FRT report?
The The FRT is the Firearms Reference Table, and it's a database that I can use to look up firearms if I do not know what they are. Sometimes guns come in with no markings, and we have to try to determine what they are. So that is not something that I use in every single case that I work.
All right. But you did in this, with that pistol, you did an FRT report.
Yes.
There was also a NIBIN worksheet, NIBIN.
There was a firearm/NIBIN worksheet. That's the worksheet that we use to either do a firearms function test, or as analysts, we would also use that worksheet if we were working a NIBIN-only case.
If you could explain to the jury what NIBIN stands for.
NIBIN is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, and what that is if I receive a firearm, I can test fire the firearm and enter cartridge cases into the database. The computer will take photos of my cartridge cases, and it will bring back possible hits to see if potentially that firearm has been used in other crimes. And I can review the potential hits to come up with, yes, I think it may have been, or no, it may not have been. If investigators submit just cartridge cases, I can also enter just images of those cartridge cases to see if they hit to other scenes as well.
Now, everything you just explained to the jury, you did that with a pistol that was brought to you by Jason Newland, right?
I did not put this firearm into the NIBIN database.
But you did a NIBIN worksheet?
I did a firearms worksheet. It's also our NIBIN worksheet.
You also took some photographs of the pistol?
Yes, I did.
Next, we have a cartridge worksheet.
Yes.
And if you could explain to the jury what a cartridge worksheet is and what work you did with this pistol.
The cartridge worksheet is just the worksheet that is used to inventory any unfired units of ammunition that I get in.
Does that mean if it has bullets in the gun, you do a worksheet for that?
When most people talk about bullets, they're talking about a live unit of ammunition. When I say a cartridge, I'm talking about a live unit of ammunition because the bullet is one part of a cartridge. The bullet is the item that is actually designed to hit a target. So when I receive a cartridge, which is an unfired unit of ammunition, often referred to by many people as bullets, I at the time would inventory the cartridges in my case.
And you did that with this pistol?
Yes.
Now, there's also a laboratory analysis electronic packing slip that you have to fill out?
I'm not sure which piece of paperwork you're talking about on that.
Would it help your memory if I showed you the packing slip?
Yes.
At this point, I'm going to object to relevance.
Almost done, Your
We've
Honor.
gone this far, let's go ahead and finish. Been talking about it for a long time.
If you take a look at that, let me know if that helps you.
That piece of paperwork is not something that is in my case file, and it's not something that I would routinely run. I think that is a piece of paperwork that would come from our evidence section.
Something that FDLE would have to produce as part of the process of evaluating a piece of evidence, right?
Yes.
There's also case notes that you do. These are handwritten notes.
Yes.
And almost to the end of the list, you also have a case tracking form for FDLE that you do.
Yes.
A head stamp report.
For this case, I did.
If you could real briefly explain to the jury what a head stamp report is.
If I receive a unit of ammunition and I'm not sure who made that particular brand of ammunition or perhaps even what caliber it is, I can look up in our head stamp database to try to determine what kind of ammunition it is. It's just a tool that we can use to try to determine something that we're not sure about.
If I'm understanding this correctly, with each piece of evidence, it's a thorough process. There's a lot of paperwork that gets done. There's a lot of time that you put into it, and it's done objectively, right?
Correct.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect.
So all the questions that you just answered about the firearm that was submitted, that firearm did not fire the 2 projectiles.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Right. Any jury have a question of this witness? All right, you can step down. Be a good place to break. All right, y'all had enough for one day? All right, y'all know the drill. Don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't let anyone discuss the case with you. Let's be back and ready to go. Let's be back at 8:45, please. Have a good evening. We're gonna stay in session a little while here. All right, everybody be seated, please. So, how are we doing time-wise, Ms. Kappelman?
Okay, I think we're probably about a half a day behind, but we're also considering not calling some of the witnesses we were gonna call, so we're close.
What would be your best estimate of when you'd be done with your side?
Monday.
So, midday Monday, end of day Monday, or what's your?
I guess midday is our best guess, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. So, defense ought to have any witnesses they need available Monday. We don't want to finish up the state's case and sit around waiting on defense witnesses.
Yes, sir, so we'll have our witness here Monday.
Right.
Is that fine?
Yes.
We're pretty much determined on who we're gonna call. Of course, it could change with who the government still calls, but we'll make sure to have them here Monday ready to go.
Okay. And you have any better sense, Ms. Sangaday, how much you're going to have now?
Yes, I would say half a day, if that. With the caveat that if I do put my sign on the stand, that could change.
Right. McBanwell?
Same answer, Your Honor. Maybe half a day. That could change if Ms. McBanwell takes a stand. One other issue with respect of us calling. So we had subpoenaed Investigator Isom, Agent Sanford, Investigator Bennett, and a few others. And in our subpoena, we said either show up on September 23rd or contact my office and leave us a means of communication with which we can get in touch with you to come. Nobody showed up on the 23rd. They didn't give us the information. I don't doubt that they'll show up when they're needed. But, I've normally gotten some assistance from the prosecution on this to communicate with those witnesses to make sure they're here when we need them. Because I have no direct communication and they didn't fully comply with the subpoena. But again, they're law enforcement, so I know they will.
Nobody has asked me for any assistance in coordinating those witnesses, all three of which were outside the courtroom as recently as an hour ago. So I have communication with them and can accommodate that request.
Right. Well, I think they're all set to testify sometime in the next couple of days, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
But why don't you, if you would please, just let them know they need to be available Monday morning once they finish testifying.
Yes, sir.
For the state.
The bonuses and the prosecution knows exactly who we're calling, so they can prepare accordingly.
Seems like we need to share the evidence again today. We went through some lengthier than I need to see the evidence. Let's go through the evidence, make sure we don't have to do that. That's just a waste of the jury's time. Y'all have seen all this evidence before. Ms. Kappelman, let's make sure they've seen what's marked for evidence so we don't have to go through that big charade acting like they've never seen it before. I want to start talking about jury instructions probably tomorrow morning. So if you haven't printed out the jury instructions or if you haven't read over them, please read over them. Probably want to start talking about them tomorrow. There is a legal issue. I don't know whether any of you are going to be seeking lesser included offenses under the conspiracy and solicitation charge. There are some 4th DCA cases that say on a case like this, there are no lesser included. If y'all think you're seeking lesser included, you better do some research on that to show why lesser should be given. The standard table shows no lessers, 4th DCA, and if somebody wants the site, I can give you a site at least to get you started. Is anybody interested in a site on those?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
All right. There are a couple of them, but let me just give you one, and it'll tie you into the rest of it. It'd be Castro v. State, 939 Southern 2nd 306. It's a 4th DCA case. And they cite to several other cases in the 4th DCA on that subject. So, anything else from either side we need to resolve?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, we'll see y'all at 8:30.